These dressers are in need of a huge makeover. They're old, outdated, and although similar, they don't quite match. By the end of this video, they'll be matching a lot better so I can sell them as a set. How I got these dressers? Well, that's kind of a cool story, and it's definitely something I have never done before. I'll get into it in just a bit, but first, make sure you like this video and subscribe if you aren't already, and let's go ahead and get into this makeover. This one dresser came with the blue tape. Sometimes you gotta be kind of careful with tape, even if it's as gentle as this. If it's not a solid piece, it could actually rip the finish off. This happens pretty often with MDF pieces from IKEA or anything similar. Luckily, these are solid wood though, and the tape didn't affect anything. One thing that I love about smaller dressers is that there is not many pieces of hardware that you have to take off. By all means, it is not a hard process, but when you have bigger pieces, it can take some time. Occasionally, I like doing smaller pieces like this because they just fly by. In addition to taking the hardware off, I also like to pull out all the drawers so that the drawers are separate from the body. I just find that it's easier to work on each part individually. In order to get these two pieces to match better, I'm removing the original hardware. Although similar, they aren't the same, and this is an easy way to make them match. Plus, in my opinion, I'm really not a fan of these types of hardware anyways, so more times than not, you'll see me replacing the hardware. To replace the original hardware, I'm using these bronze knobs that were gifted to me. I have quite a few of them to use up, and I think they're gonna match the style that I'm going for perfectly. I needed 16 total of these knobs, and when you get into a high count of hardware like that, for a furniture flip, it can get kind of expensive. For that reason, I don't recommend that you go to any of your local hardware stores to buy individual pieces because they can be upwards of $3 or $4 a piece. Instead, check out your thrift stores. They often have knobs, or you can go on hardware and find sets of hardware for much cheaper. I will leave a few of my favorite Amazon hardware finds in the description box down below if you are interested. Now I'm laying these all out on some cardboard because although I love the shape of the knob, I'm not obsessed with the color for the design I'm going for at least. The reason I'm going to be spray painting these is because it's a cheap and easy way to spruce up your hardware if you don't absolutely love them. My favorite spray paint is this gold from Rust-Oleum, and at this point I've used it more times than I can count. It's never failed me and I absolutely love it. Now I'm not really good at spray painting, but my biggest tip that I can give you is just do a ton of light coats rather than one big coat. Like, don't try to just get it all full coverage in one coat because then it can get pretty messy and the finish doesn't come out the way you might want it to. So I always just kind of do small little coats. You can also see me going around each side as well because you can often miss a lot of spots on knobs like these. So off camera, after the first coat dries, I do come back later and just make sure to give it a good second coat so that it does have full coverage. The next thing that I like to get out of the way in the beginning is working on these drawer fronts and filling in all of these hardware holes. I like to do this pretty early on because it takes a couple hours for the wood filler to dry. In fact, sometimes it can take even overnight. And on top of that, sometimes it needs 2 coats. I am using this Minwax stainable wood filler. I used it a lot when I first started flipping furniture, but then I went off and tried other products. So now it has been a while since I've used it and I want to give it a try again. Initially, I was kind of worried that this product wasn't going to be strong enough for how big these hardware holes were, but to my surprise, it actually held up really well and worked out really great for this piece and the hardware holes that were here before. Now, if the holes were any bigger, I maybe would have tried a stronger product like Bondo. Otherwise, I know Minwax wood filler does make some stronger products for bigger holes, but for this project it worked out just fine. Luckily, I got away with only having to do 1 round of wood filler, which in my eyes is always a blessing because sometimes you just do have to go back and do another. With the wood filler having to dry, I wrapped up for the night, but then came back early the next morning, and I'm getting my respirator on because I am starting my day off with a good scuff sand. On top of scuff sanding, I'm also going to sand down the excess wood filler that are on the drawers. Now, if you've never made over a piece of furniture and you're not familiar with what a scuff sand is, basically you're just trying to roughen up the surface so that it creates little indents and little scratches in the surface, and that will help your paint adhere. Your primer and your paint will adhere for a lot longer if you do something like this. I guess I shouldn't have said I didn't need a second round of wood filler, because although I didn't need a full second round, I did need some for just some of the holes. Sometimes that happens as well, and that's why you're not seeing me sand down these drawers yet, because I'm waiting on that second coat to dry, and we're just gonna have to play a little bit of catch up on the drawers. But in the meantime, the body of these two dressers are ready to go, which means I can go ahead and get started on cleaning. I just like to use Dawn dish soap and warm water, and that really gets the job done. And although the cleaning process is really important, it's kind of boring to watch. So instead, here's the before and after of how much dirt there was on this cleaning rag. They really weren't that bad. Now it's time for the fun part, which is paint. Well, primer then paint, but painting in general is just fun, whether it's primer or paint. So my favorite product to use is this Zinsser 123 primer. It is an adhesion primer, not a stain blocking primer. So if you need something that's gonna block some stains, I would avoid this one. But this is a good adhesion primer, and I think that you get the best bang for your buck with it. Priming isn't always necessary. You should really check the paint that you are using, and it'll tell you if it needs primer beforehand or not. However, if you do not know whether you need primer or not, I would always say just go ahead and prime anyways. And plus, when you're selling for profit or you're just selling your pieces in general, it's always kind of good to prime your pieces regardless. It's never gonna hurt your piece if you do prime when you don't have to, but it really could hurt it if you choose not to prime when you should be. This was a pretty short day. I didn't work too long. I got through the primer and then I just kind of let it dry throughout the day and overnight, and then it was time to start playing catch up on these drawer fronts because with needing that second coat of wood filler, it takes a little bit longer. I'm just following the same process as before, sanding down the excess wood filler as well as giving these drawer fronts another little scuff sand while we're at it. And then I got them cleaned off and headed straight into priming again. I had to be careful on these first 4 drawer fronts because they had those faux lock key things, and I decided I wanted to keep them because it just added more character. So I just had to be careful painting around those. Luckily, that second set of drawers didn't have that, so the next 4 went a lot quicker. I guess it was a little bit hard getting into those grooves that you see here, but it really isn't a problem. I love hand painting. It's so relaxing and so calming for me, so I'm really not complaining. This day was a little bit warmer than the other days, so it only took a couple hours for the primer to dry and then I could head into paint. I'm using this Valspar signature paint. I love this brand of paint, and here's all the details if you guys want to go ahead and screenshot and save. I ended up really liking this color and it came from the Oops section, so that's actually how I find some of my most favorite neutrals. I have another favorite neutral. It's kind of like a cream, and it's called Oat Brand by Valspar Signature, and it is one of my absolute favorites. I love all of these neutrals that I can find in the Oops paint. Oh, you guys, what a pretty color. Now, while I paint these, let's talk about the story time of how I got these 2 dressers. I got them from a storage locker that I paid $120 for, which is kind of steep, I know, especially for 2 dressers like this. But what's awesome about that $120 price is that it came with a ton of other stuff on top of these dressers. So, you know, there were side tables, coffee tables, chairs, clothes, knickknacks, just a bunch of other stuff that I can sell. And my goal with this makeover was to make my money back as well as profit with these 2 dressers. And then from there, everything else from that storage locker would be pure profit, which is a huge score. Now, I already sold these for $400 as a set, so I definitely exceeded that goal, and I'm so happy with how the outcome turned out. I really love this color, and I think the color just sold these dressers, especially with the hardware, which you're gonna see very soon. This first coat had pretty good coverage, but you can tell it wasn't full coverage quite yet, so I did go ahead and get started on a second coat, and then that was really all that I needed. I didn't even need a third coat touch-up, which sometimes I do need, and especially for a light color like this, I think that's great, but this Valspar signature paint is just so thick, and I think that's why I love it so much, because it works really well. After this, all I had to do was put the hardware back on and then get it staged and ready to sell. Now make sure you guys like this video and subscribe. You'd be helping me out big time. I'm trying to reach my first 10,000 subscribers, but anyways, you guys, let's go ahead and get into the final reveal.
Try to make it new. You can't fight it when it feels so true.